We are only entering week 2, and we are already in must-win mode for the Oregon State Beavers. Fresno State has found their running game, and Boise State has to win out just to be college football playoff eligible. All of that right here on this first ever episode of the Pac-12 Daily Podcast. Yes, welcome on into the Pac-12 Daily Podcast. I'm your host, Christian Rao, and welcome to the new era of college athletics. The new Pac-12 starts July 2026, but I'm not waiting around. Welcome to the first episode where we dive in. Let's get right to it. Oregon State. Is Trent Bray already in the hot seat after the loss against Cal, after only going 5-7 last year? I mean, I think that there's a valid argument. Now you sit at 5-8 overall as the head coach of Oregon State. You have a tough schedule coming ahead for the first month of the year. There's a chance where we could be talking this coach is 5-11 heading into the next month, heading into October. So I do think that there is a chance that you need to consider Trent Bray to be on the hot seat. Why Fresno State? This game between Oregon State and Fresno State is an absolute must win for the Beavers. There's no doubt about that. But when I look at Oregon State, when I watch that game against Cal, I think there's some things that you can be excited about, and there's also some things where you can take and say, okay, when I go and play Fresno State, I'm not going to have to worry about this, what seems to be a freshman phenom at quarterback that Cal has with the freshman from Hawaii. Awesome name, by the way. I'm not going to try and butcher it on our first episode here, but overall, really enjoyed what I saw from Cal. So maybe that's just the fact that you just got handed a Justin Wilcox team trying to get back on the up and up themselves. But overall, Oregon State needs to bounce back. There was some mistakes, easy mistakes with like handling the football, not having a great snap. Those are things that can easily be corrected, but must be corrected during the practice windows this week. Maalik Murphy threw for 244 yards. He also rushed for 15 yards. The rushing game was atrocious. I'll get to that in a second. But he did show some promise, especially to Trent Walker. And even though you had 9 receptions to Trent Walker, I think you got to get him more involved. You have to find a way to get Trent Walker involved more into your offense. Is that even possible? I think it is, but you have to find a way to make it happen because whenever he touched the football, it was explosive, it was exciting, and it seemed like 7 of those 9 receptions gave you the good feeling that there was a possibility that he could make an even bigger play and extend those drives and get you excited for what is to come. You can get him the ball more if you can make the running game work. And the fact that he actually went for over 100 yards in this game, with the way that this running game actually, how atrocious it was, Trent Walker still being able to go 9 receptions for 136 yards is actually really impressive because Oregon State suffered on the running game. I mean, it was atrocious. It was probably the worst running game I've seen in a very long time. It's definitely in the Trent Bray era for sure. Anthony Hankerson, 15 carries, 42 yards. That's his second worst all time while being in an Oregon State uniform. The worst one comes against Air Force last year where he only had 6 carries. So if you want to consider this as worse with 15 carries for 42 yards, now he did score, but still, that's not what you're looking for from arguably your most talented player on the offense in Anthony Hankerson. Him and Trent Walker, I think, take the cake in that one. If those two guys aren't firing, and then you're not getting some of the other things from your tight ends like Bryce Caulfield and things like that, then you're going to be in a tough situation. And the fact that you lost 34-15 might actually be a blessing that it wasn't any worse, because it could have got a lot worse. And I think that is something that they need to pay attention to moving forward. This Fresno State game is absolutely huge. It is a huge step forward for Trent Bray, and I think it's a must win. If Trent Bray loses this football game, listen to what the rest of the schedule is for the month of September. That's it, just the month of September for Oregon State. Let's say they get an L against Fresno State. This one is at home. Thankfully, that's a good thing. But then they go on the road to Lubbock against Texas Tech. Ranked right now, they looked pretty good in their FCS game, their warm-up game. Then they're on the road against Oregon. They're in Eugene. They're ranked 6th in the nation right now. And then they finish the month of September back at home against the University of Houston, where Willie Fritz has really started turning around that program. There is a solid chance if you don't get the win against Fresno State, you might not get a win the entire rest of the month of September. And then when you're talking about Trent Bray's record, what he has so far this year, he's already at 5-8. You tack on a couple more of those, you're talking a potential 5-11 to start his coaching career. at Oregon State. Is that something that you should feel comfortable about if you're an Oregon State fan? If you're sitting at a 5-11 Trent Bray and think that he's not on the hot seat, I think if you go 0-5, I think you are most definitely on the hot seat. And then you can head into Appalachian State, Wake Forest, Lafayette, and then the 2 games against Washington State, and hopefully try and revitalize your season. Hopefully still try and find a way to get to bowl eligibility. But 0-5, that's a tough stretch to get back to 7-5 or even lucky 6-6. That's why I think Fresno State is an absolute must win. Even if you finish the month of September at 1-4 instead of 0-5, I think you can still take some positives from that because of the strength of schedule that you saw from Texas Tech, in Oregon, and potentially Houston. Didn't expect Cal to be this good, especially with that freshman quarterback. They kind of really shocked you to start the season. You can't let Fresno State do that. You've seen Fresno State 2 times now on tape for this season. You've seen what EJ Warner is. You've seen what their running game is. We're going to get to that running game in the second segment here on this podcast because I think Fresno State's running game is super impressive. Now, can Oregon State stop Fresno State's running game? Well, they did pretty well against Cal. They only allowed Cal 122 yards, just under 4 yards a carry. But let's be honest, the fact that they had Sagapula Lele, I think I said his name wrong, probably did, 234 yards, 20 for 30 and 3 touchdowns. The fact that he did what he did, and I don't think he missed an incompletion until like his 11th pass of the game. They didn't need to run the football. And these are Cal running backs or everyone who came from the portal. If you remember, Cal left like 5 running backs hit the portal. They brought in 3 other ones from different places around the country. It was new. It was in the late spring portal and in the summer as well. This is a new, fresh running back for Brian Harsin as the offensive coordinator of Cal. It's not going to be like that with Fresno State. Fresno State's running game is really, really good, and we're going to dive into that in just a second. But if I'm off base here, which I don't think I am, I think the game for Oregon State against Fresno State is an absolute win, a must win. They have to win that football game against Fresno State if Trent Bray wants to get through this season. Because if not, he might not get through to October. There might be a moment if they go 0-5 and before they hit Appalachian State, there could be a potential time where they decide to cut ties with him now and go chase a head coach to get ready for the portal window, get ready for recruiting battles so they don't lose those and kind of just punt on this year. It's crazy that we're thinking about the potential of punting on a season already heading into week 2. But I think you're at that moment if you don't win against Fresno State this coming Saturday. Let's talk about Fresno State. Let's dive into them next because I think their running game is super impressive, but there are still a few liabilities that make them not the front runner for me in the Mountain West, aka those teams that are going to be coming to new Pac-12 here pretty soon. We'll talk about that next right here on the Pac-12 Daily Podcast. Fresno State impressed against Georgia Southern. A lot of that thanks is to the running game. There is no doubt in my mind that that running game is one of the best in the Mountain West and becoming that new Pac-12 team in 2026. I really like what they have in the backfield when you look at Donaldson and Luke Ramirez. I even think you put Elijah Gilliam in that conversation as well. Fresno State is super impressive when it comes to running, and they proved it against Georgia Southern. And that's something that was shocked me. I was surprised because they didn't get to do that at all against Kansas. They were held in check against the Jayhawks. So being able to do that and being able to get back on path and kind of getting to the point to where they want to be, their bread and butter in the run game, is super impressive before they get to the Oregon State game this Saturday. As I mentioned in the first segment, I think it's a must-win game for Oregon State. So that means Fresno State, of course, will be tested trying to get themselves to 2-1 and try to become a front runner inside the Mountain West Conference this season. I think you look at this running game, and Oregon State didn't allow a lot of rushing yards in the game against Cal, although Oregon State did lose that game to Cal. And you know that they're going to go right back to it. They're going to go back to the well. They're going to continue that rushing game, and they should. They should get more from Luke, one of the fastest guys in the game. I mean, he's so fun to watch. When he gets to the corner, if he can turn it right and not get out of bounds, then he's gone. if he finds the corner. I think Donaldson is super impressive. And as I mentioned, I think, of course, you got Ramirez, but I think Gilliam should get more in the conversation as well if you can find the snaps for him. Fresno State has one of the best running back crews in the entire West Coast. I mean, in all of G5, maybe, to be completely honest with you on this conversation. What concerns me about Fresno State is not their running game. It's EJ Warner. Right now, I have to say that he's a liability to this roster. I don't know if there's a better option, but we've seen him at Rice, we've seen him at Temple, and the things about he does haven't really changed. He's aggressive, but aggressive to a fault, where he does allow turnovers. Already at 4 interceptions this season. He threw a couple bad interceptions last week. The one in Kansas, there was the one that he had in Kansas was like a tip. So like you can maybe say 3 of those 4 interceptions are his fault. But overall, EJ Warner has struggled finding his receivers downfield. When he rolls out, and that seems to happen, some of this is on the offensive line of Fresno State, especially the left side. But when he rolls out to the right, he finds a little bit more success. It sounds like he's got a little bit more time, a little more patience for him to be able to make a confident throw downfield. But 2 of his interceptions have come where he was either rushed, hurried, or hit when throwing on that left side of the offensive line or on the field. Now, I know they're dealing with a brand new left tackle in the system, and Braden Walton, young guy. I mean, he's a stud, 6'7", 300-something pounds. The guy's going to be a great player, and he's already showing improvement week by week compared to KU to the Georgia Southern. But it's a work in process, and playing left tackle is not an easy thing to step right into, but he's trying to do that for Fresno State. EJ Warner has to figure out when he's going to throw the ball away instead of just trying to make it downfield and always making a play. That is something that I was yelling at my screen, hoping you could hear me when he was having those interceptions against Georgia Southern. He rolled out to the left. He was getting rushed, should have just threw the ball away. It wasn't a 4th down or a 3rd and long situation. It was something that he could have tried on the next play, that he could have lived to see another play, but instead had to go to the sidelines because it was a turnover due to the interception. Those 4 interceptions are huge. And if he would have had less interceptions in the Kansas game, I'm not saying they win that game by any stretch of the imagination, but I think it's different. I think you see a little bit more of their mentality. Maybe you get to see more of their running game in KU that can help them explode and get ready for that next week against Georgia Southern. Maybe they aren't an underdog like we thought they were going to be in that game. And then if you don't have those turnovers against Georgia Southern, this game is wide open right off the bat, not just until the second half like it was on a Saturday. If they can find a way, if he can calm and collect himself, focus on the running game, and if it fails, find guys like Freeman and Donaldson and Avitt and find those guys without forcing it and hopefully not rolling out to the left, because that seems where a lot of the problems reside at the moment, then I think they find a way to win this football game against Oregon State. This is going to be one of those really close games on Saturday. This is a must-watch game. It's if you're talking Pacific Coast time, 12:30 on the CW network. It's going to be really, really good. ESPN matchup predictor has Fresno State 62.4% chance of winning this one. Only the 37.6 to Oregon State. I don't have the odds in front of me at the moment. I don't have the spread. But I think Fresno State is and should be the favorites in this one based on what we saw at the running game against Georgia Southern. If they can continue that once again, if they can limit the turnovers, and that's pointing directly at EJ Warner, then they will probably, most likely, get Oregon State quite easily. And then it all goes back to what we talked about earlier about Oregon State being the potential putting Trent Bray on the hot seat in the month of September. I like Fresno State. I think they're in a good shape, but it all relies and stems on that running game. If we fail on that running game, if Fresno falls, then it's going to be just like that KU game, and they're going to falter. Speaking of faltering, Boise State had one of the worst outings to begin a season, especially after being in the college football playoffs last season. Aston Genty obviously was a big part of that offense, and it's not the same this year. Falling to South Florida by a huge amount. Let's finish this conversation up on the other side right here on the Pac-12 Daily Podcast. Well, game one without Ashton Jeanty for Boise State did not go as planned at all. And quite frankly, this team looks far away from being a college football playoff contender than they were a year prior, losing 34-7 against South Florida in week one. And it just wasn't what we expected for a team that got the preseason nod for 25th in the country to start the season. And that might have been a nod just out of respect because you're in college football playoffs, but I think we found out that Ashton Jeanty really was the heart and soul of that offense because they struggled mightily in this game. There was some awful turnovers. There was just some egregious plays. But what I want to get to here is because they lost against South Florida, when you look at the rest of Boise State's schedule, and really it stems on one extra game here, the Notre Dame game, if they can't beat the Fighting Irish, which in my mind, I don't think they're going to be even close to competing with Notre Dame based off what we saw against South Florida. If they pick up that second loss, I think you are completely out of it unless the rest of the G5 falls apart for the college, returning to the college football playoffs. Maddox Matson concerned me. I was not impressed with anything that really he was giving the game. And I want to see more from Maddox. I think that he has the ability to, get this team to a Mountain West championship and get them to the college football playoffs like he was in charge of doing last year. Of course, again, I'm aware Gentry was there, but he went 25 for 46, 225 and a touchdown. But I just didn't like anything else, really what I was seeing from him. I thought he made some bad decisions. I thought we were seeing, obviously, there were some issues with the football, some turnovers, fumbling, you name it. I was just not impressed. And to the point to where if they don't shape it up and figure this out, and they have some time to figure it out, Eastern Washington this week, Air Force, Appalachian State, before they get to Notre Dame, if they don't figure it out by then, of course, the season's already over, but maybe we start seeing a transition at quarterback. Like, is it too early to think that? It might be, but I think that's on a concerned watch. If you're going to do the tornado watch warnings and advisories, I think we're on an advisory right now of a potential change at quarterback at Boise State if this doesn't shape up. I don't think the statistics and the box score are really giving you the honest truth of what we saw at Boise State. Sire Gaines, I think eventually is going to be fine. He's not going to be a Heisman Trophy candidate in the backfield like we had with Ashton Jeanty, but I think he's going to fill the shoes just fine for Boise State for the season. I really do. 9 carries, 44 yards, just under 5 yards a carry. They just need to feed him more. And unfortunately, they couldn't do that because they were quickly down in this game after scoring first. They put the first 7 on the board. South Florida put the next 34. 34-7 final. I mean, it's just an embarrassing look for Boise State. But you're 0-1. You made the college football playoffs at 11-1 last year, winning the conference. If you fall to Notre Dame and even went out and go 10-2, you still have to get some hope and some love and some other things falling your way inside the G5. You have to. A 10-5 team in the G5 winning your conference probably doesn't do it. There's probably going to be another team out there that is better. So you're going to hope and pray that someone in the American, so whether that is South Florida or Tulane or UTSA or whatever the case is, and some from the MAC and some from Conference USA, don't go 11-1. Now, I think you are a little bit lucky in the case of South Florida because they have a tough schedule ahead too in Florida and Miami. But if South Florida gets one of those wins and then sit at 11-1, or even get one of those wins and is at 10-2, and Boise State doesn't get Notre Dame and sits at 10-2, they're not going to win that tiebreaker over South Florida because of the head-to-head and because of their Power 4 win, excuse me. So, Boise State, what are you going to do? Can Matson shine? I hope he can. 225, it just wasn't enough. I want to see him make a statement win against Eastern Washington, get them back on pace. That game's at 6 o'clock Pacific on Fox Sports 1 on Friday. So hopefully they can. It's the only game on. So everybody's going to be watching yet again. There's no NFL on. Or there is actually. There's an NFL game, so maybe you get lucky if you don't mess up. Some people will be watching I think the Chiefs and Chargers instead of you. But either way, you got to shine on Eastern Washington. And then Air Force Appalachian State before October 4th against Notre Dame in South Bend. It's going to be a tough one for Boise State to bounce back. I don't want to write them off right now. I don't want to say their season's completely over. I think even with a loss to Notre Dame, you still have a chance because I think the G5 could be crazy this year. But either way, you're in a tough spot after losing 34-7. I think the best case you can hope for is win out, even and potentially if you lose, have a respectable loss against Notre Dame, and hope that South Florida shines against the rest of their schedule, but still finds themselves behind Boise State in the standings. So a 10-2, potentially 9-3 seasons for South Florida, a respectable season. So that loss, that 34-7 loss, doesn't look egregious. Because if South Florida finds themselves back in the 7-5, 6-6 territory, that loss is going to mean even much more for the entire season if they're trying to get themselves back into the playoffs once the season comes around. I mean, they finish 4 games in a row against new Pac-12 teams. Fresno State, at San Diego State, back home against Colorado State, and at Utah State. It's going to be a fun ride for Boise State. And then we're going to get ready to see what they do this season. It's going to wrap it up for this episode, new Pac-12 Daily Podcast. We're going to be back here every day. We're going to dive into some more of the new Pac-12 teams tomorrow. We're going to give you reaction shows throughout the weekend as well. We're not going anywhere. We're here every day now, just getting started. Wanted to start this a little earlier, but we're here now. So be sure to check us out at Pac-12 Daily on Twitter X, and you can find some written work as well as supporting the podcast anywhere you listen to your audio or on YouTube. Hit that subscribe. We're going to grow this channel. If you are a fan of the new Pac-12, be sure to check with us every single day. And then you can find us at pac12daily.com. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Take care.